With Vanguard's launch, you're going to be wanting to jump in and perfect absolutely everything that you can. A lot of that comes down to your settings on either console or on PC. Today, we're going to be breaking down the best settings and what you should be focusing on no matter what platform you're on. So as we go along, let me know your thoughts down below. Is there anything in particular that you think we should add to this list of best settings? Anything that maybe you never considered but is beneficial? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts below. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like down below. Let's aim for 3,000 likes on this video. You guys have been crushing the recent ones, so thank you so much for the continued support. I think we can do it again. And finally, if you guys are new to the channel and want to stay up to date with all things Vanguard, hit that subscribe button. We're on that road to 500,000 subscribers, and with nearly 60% of viewers not subscribed to the channel, I'd love to have you along for the ride while also keeping you up to date with all things Vanguard. So if you're interested, hit that subscribe button. That said, let's jump into the settings that you should be using. So in this video, we're going to be breaking down a couple of different areas of the settings of Vanguard. A lot of this stuff we'll talk about comes down to some basics and console-specific settings, but also as we get later on in the video, I want to talk about some things that are specific to PC, some things that can help optimize your performance, your quality, everything like that. So we'll start out with some of the basic settings you should definitely run over and take a look at, and some console specific things. Now, first and foremost, one of the big things that I always change here whenever we jump into a new Call of Duty, whether it be an alpha, beta, or full launch, is that of my horizontal and vertical sensitivity. This isn't anything that I personally can recommend to you and have a specific answer for, but what I can recommend is going into a private match, testing out your sensitivities until you find something you feel is best for you. That is, if you don't already know, or stick to a relatively normal range of values year over year. For me, I'm usually right around the 9.9 on my horizontal and vertical sensitivity. Additionally, in recent years, we've had that ADS sensitivity multiplier, so also take that into consideration, play around with that, see if you want any bit of a slower or faster rotation when you're aimed in on an enemy. Essentially just adding in another sensitivity setting for simply when you're aimed down sight, only then. Next, the button layout is another one that I automatically change anytime I jump into a new game. This, again, is another preference-based one, so I can't give you a specific answer, but I've always personally played on tactical to give me that ability to slide a bit easier, dolphin dive in some games, but I don't find myself needing to panic melee, so I don't really think that I need to have that B button bound to my right thumbstick. Instead, I can switch that around and give myself a little bit of a benefit in some mobility. When it comes down to the mechanics of Vanguard, and also as of recently, things like Modern Warfare and Warzone, slide canceling is a huge thing, so you can use that to your advantage with incredible ease. And we'll talk about some things actually regarding that a little later on in the video. Your aim response curve type is also something that in recent years has been adjusted and introduced. This is for your controller players, and these settings kind of determine what kind of feedback your thumbstick will then equate to in-game. On the engineering side behind these kind of come down to if you want your acceleration into your aim before, after, or not at all. What I end up using is dynamic. This allows me to, in the initial aim, have a little bit of a faster sweep here with it, but then it has a slight aim slowdown once I get closer towards that enemy. It's good for precise aim and especially at range, but then you have things like your standard, which ends up having a slower aim response at first, but then can speed up a little bit into that snapping. That's what's on by default, and then your linear is something that is one-to-one. Whatever you end up putting in there is what you'll end up getting out. There is no system feedback that either blocks one way or the other. Personally, I think dynamic is the way to go. You'll also probably see this recommended by a ton of pros as well, but it certainly comes with a little bit of a level of experience here. It's definitely not something that I would recommend to the newer player. Though if you can keep up, I think it's the most beneficial for your gameplay. Dead zone settings, again, this also comes down to the individual user. My controller may have a little bit more stick drift than yours, or vice versa. This is used to tone that down a little bit to be able to interact with the game and not have to worry about errant movements from your controller sticks. Increasing this ends up compensating for a little bit more stick drift, and oppositely, decreasing it allows for a little bit more freedom in that mobility. Talking about controllers a little further, we have those target aim assist settings, in which in Vanguard we have default, precision, focusing, and black ops. Default, that's your traditional aim slowdown when aiming near a target. That's default to what we've already seen in Warzone and other Call of Duties in the past. Precision is something that has a stronger slowdown when aiming closer to a target, and so therefore is better for accurate players. Focusing, if you're newer to the analog aiming and sticks with a controller, this is something that will slow you down when narrowly missing a target, so something that can help you out there as well. Black Ops, this final one, is actually an alternate slowdown, which we saw was the standard default setting within Black Ops Cold War this past year. So if you like the aiming of Cold War, this could be something that you can apply then to Vanguard as well. Since we're going to go by it sequentially, I want to take a second and mention the ADS mount activation. Check in on this on your account, because when we played this pre-launch, it was defaulted to just ADS, so anytime that you aim down sight at an enemy, if you're close enough to a wall, you'd mount on it automatically. So that's not ideal. Change that. My suggested way is ADS plus melee. Blind fire, that's up to you. I leave it on, but I never use it, so it's not something that I really interact with. Automatic airborne mantle, I turn this off and highly recommend it. I want full control of my own movement, and sometimes if I'm trying to evade something, it'll auto mantle me if I jump, say, out of a window or something like that, and can get me in a tough spot where I'm caught in a mantle that I didn't want to do. Automatic sprint is another one that is preference based, but I personally prefer automatic tac sprint, going full speed into everything when possible. Sure, it does have its downsides, but as somebody that likes to rush around, this is something that saves my controller, that left thumbstick, from being mashed to all hell and back. So it may not be for you, but highly recommend it if you are somebody that ends up utilizing tac sprint a lot. It saves that controller's lifespan by a ton. Then another thing when it comes to sprinting, I'd suggest enabling sprint cancels reload, because this is something that if you maybe say round a corner and an enemy is there, or vice versa, it allows you to just cancel a reload if you're in one and take that gunfight. It gives you a chance, whereas otherwise you wouldn't. You'd be stuck in that animation. And finally, with some gameplay settings, slide behavior, I would definitely recommend tap instead of hold if you want to increase your movement potential. Again, coming back to it, talking about slide canceling, they ended up changing that movement from the beta to where that's now basically Modern Warfare's with slide canceling. So the tap to slide function is integral to how it's done, so make sure you check that out. Now, for my console friends, new here with Vanguard is the field of view option. You guys can rejoice, it's finally here. It returns in Vanguard this year, as it should be then. We saw it last year with Cold War, but we didn't know if it would be anywhere within Vanguard this year. Hopefully this is an indication that it's going to be every year coming in the future, and now just... what about Warzone? Hopefully that gets added in as well. But this again is something that I can't give a definitive answer for, but it's something that I definitely suggest going into a private match and testing out for yourself. I personally wouldn't recommend anything lower than the base standard of 80 FOV though, because at that point, you're just hindering your visibility within game. But for reference, my sweet spot that I think is right around 110. 110 gives you enough peripheral vision without any visual distortion, where you can end up getting all the information of your surroundings, but without that visual distortion that may come of 120. With 120, you have a little bit of some fishbowl effect on your gameplay, and it may be a little bit harder to look at. My sweet spot right around 110. Another thing that I would suggest toning down in terms of visibility is your camera movement. Turn this down to the lowest option available, that being least 50%. This will in turn adjust the intensity of the camera shake movement, but doesn't apply to every instance of this, so it's not like it magically gets rid of any camera shake. This makes it a little bit more visually appealing in-game and can help alleviate motion sickness even for some players, but also can keep that camera steady when there are some times when major explosions are going on around you. Motion blur, absolutely, if you've been around the channel, you know that I'll say turn this off in every way, shape, or form. That just being something that helps out your gameplay and visibility overall, because inherently, motion blur isn't anything bad. It attempts to make the game a bit more cinematic by nature, but in doing so, it can hurt you and your ability to see enemies as you maybe sweep across your screen. Instead of it being a clear-cut image where you can just go from left to right, right to left, wherever, and you can maybe spot an enemy at a distance, it instead is the situation where they could mesh with the blurring of your image around you and you lose a gunfight because you don't spot them. So don't take that chance. Turn off motion blur. Same thing with depth of field. In an attempt to make it a little bit more cinematic, the peripherals, once you're aiming down sight, those blur out a little bit. So while it may look good in cinematic, it's not something that will help you out in spotting enemies downrange. Audio, this is something that you'll have to tweak accordingly. I've started to turn down music volume in recent years. While I absolutely love the score of this year's game, the Vanguard main theme is so dang epic, I just don't want that blaring in my headset while I'm trying to listen for players in-game that may be pushing. Jumping over to the interface category, the telemetry settings have a cool few things that you can absolutely play with in your HUD and are minimally evasive in what you end up seeing. I personally, on console, like to play with the server latency, but on PC, I always have my FPS counter. I'm just kind of that nerd here that wants to know, okay, how much can I push this game on my system? But gameplay changing ones, turn your minimap shape to square. You'll end up gaining just by default about 25 to 35% more coverage in area as opposed to what you'd end up seeing with the circular minimap. So this is something that can show you a little bit more of where your team is, or if you have the radar perk, where the enemy may be when they're firing. This is a really simple one that has some long-lasting benefits going on into the year. Also, turn on minimap rotation. By rotating, you'll be able to get a sense of what's always in front of you instead of trying to make sense of north, east, south, and west. By rotating, you'll always be able to see things that are in front of you, plus the peripherals of the minimap will update and give you a little bit of information as you rotate with that map. Now, the next thing is crosshair bobbing. This one I think was actually introduced with this game, but the hipfire of weapons, you may notice, is kind of jarring on the animation. It's a little bit more exaggerated, and with that, your crosshairs will actually bob. So visually, it throws you off from the spread, and to me, this isn't anything but an annoying visual effect that isn't necessary, so I'd suggest turning it off. But that's your console and basic settings here that you definitely want to check in on, and what I'd highly recommend. Now, jumping over to the PC-centric settings. Some basics here with this. For the display mode, for my PC friends, you probably already know that full screen is what you want for performance. Of course, you can play in windowed or full screen borderless, but the best performance will happen within full screen. Refresh rate, make sure that you have this checked off where it matches your refresh rate of your monitor, or at least is higher than 60 Hz. Definitely make sure the game is enabled for higher output here at that. The difference is absurdly noticeable. If you've ever jumped from 60 to 120 or 144, or even upwards of 240, you'll notice a difference immediately. VSync, this is a bit of an optional one here. It locks your output to match your system to prevent some frame tearing. I keep mine off. As we'll talk about here in a second, my system itself is pretty overkill, but I can usually go higher than the outputted frame rate that my monitor can go towards. While I don't necessarily see it, I don't like necessarily locking myself specifically to that. A custom frame rate limit is also actually something that's solid to set. You can set a max, a min, whatever you feel for your performance. I don't need my PC to try and push 1000 frames, so you can limit it to say like 250. You can also limit your game's menu and tabbed out frame rate to stop any unnecessary strain on your system while you're not actually playing. That's something that's also very helpful as well. Coming down to the quality tab here at this all comes down to your system performance. This is going to be case-by-case basis. Mine, you'll see nearly maxed out in every element because my system is incredibly overkill. It's an i9 with a 3090 and a 4K monitor that pushes 120 Hz, but can be overclocked to 144. I'm able to push all of that and not have to sacrifice much, so my case of ultra, high, that stuff is not likely the case for the majority of players. From here, you can adjust things like texture resolution. Just toggling this from high to medium can save you about 2 GB in VRAM usage, and when you're playing the game, how often are you stopping to look at the fine details in each individual asset of your game? If you really want to save as much VRAM as possible, if you go down to the lowest quality setting, I think it's about 3 GB saved here at this, so that's something to consider. Things like your particle quality and resolution, bullet impacts, tessellation, volumetric quality level. Adjusting these doesn't shave off too much of your VRAM usage, but it also can help improve that performance while truthfully not lowering the quality of the game too much. Those are sort of precise and fine details that are added into the game that aren't necessarily needed. They're nice, but they don't kill your gameplay experience. Shadow map resolution can save you about a gig in VRAM usage as well, going from ultra to very low, and again, it's shadows, something that is a fine detail that you can get away with if you need to save yourself some performance. Now, here's the real cool things, the PC optimized options where they come into play. You can use DLSS with Vanguard on PC. This is a huge option for people pushing higher resolutions. DLSS, or Deep Learning Super Sampling, is an AI resolution tool that can help provide the maximum quality and the maximum frame rate, trying to get the best of both worlds. You're going to notice that this is helpful between 1440p or 2K and upward. Anything of those resolutions and higher naturally will start to wear on your hardware. You'll start to notice that you'll see heat increases for your CPU and GPU, increased fan stress as a result, frame drops by comparison on average, and more. But DLSS does a solid job at actually minimizing that stress where possible. When I was playing campaign, it was rendering the whole world. A lot of the cutscenes are in-engine, so from nearly start to finish, the workload of the game was on my PC. I gained about 50 to 60 frames per second just by switching this to the performance mode, which is recommended for 4K gameplay and above, which is what I play at. So if you want some extra help here in terms of your performance, the detailed DLSS options are actually relatively on point. So if you play at 2K, quality is a great option in terms of that setting, performance is great for 4K, and balanced is kind of what it says. Balanced. And finally, the last setting we'll talk about here in this video comes down to your NVIDIA Reflex low latency tech. This has the options of off, on, and on plus boost. off, that low latency is disabled. On, low latency is enabled and optimizes system latency. But with on plus boost, that allows you to end up enabling and optimizing that latency that your system may have, which also allows for GPU clock frequencies to be kept higher, but also reducing the stress of CPU bound cases, which is something that Vanguard and Warzone, Modern Warfare, they're all very CPU intensive. So this allows you to get better performance while not killing your hardware as much. So if applicable, I would absolutely recommend that low latency tech. Put that to on plus boost. But anyways, that's the settings that are of key importance, I think, within Vanguard, and some things that can help you out in terms of either setting the basics, some console specific stuff, and or on PC, helping out with that quality and performance. But that said, that's where we're gonna wrap it up. I just want to share this with you guys here, jump into some of these settings so that come day one here with Vanguard, wherever you are in the world, whether that be right now already live or in a couple of hours when the game goes live for North America, you can jump in with the best possible quality and settings for your game. So let me know your thoughts down below. Are you guys gonna be utilizing any of these settings, anything you didn't quite know about? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts down below. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel and want to stay updated with all things Vanguard, the launch is just starting here. We have so much stuff coming up on the channel you guys will not want to miss. So hit that subscribe button if you guys are new. If you also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to chat with me outside of YouTube. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever the case may be, that link is down there in the description below. That said, thanks so much for watching. My name has been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.